Hello and welcome to Eye on Africa. I'm Clarisse Fortuné and here are the top stories from across the continent. A dramatic twist in Paris as former Congolese rebel leader abruptly dismisses his legal team just hours after his long-awaited trial opened. Roger Lumbala is accused of crimes against humanity committed in the DR Congo, committed more than 2 decades ago. Several West African nationals deported from the United States to Ghana are challenging their forced repatriation in court. But even as the legal battle unfolds, immigration authorities have already begun removing some by force. And at COP30 in Boualem, global leaders pledged once again to back the energy transition. But with Africa still receiving just 2% of global clean energy investment, the question remains, how can the continent turn those promises into real power and progress? In Paris, the trial of Congolese Roger Lumbala opened on Wednesday. The former rebel leader and one-time minister in the DR Congo is accused of crimes against humanity allegedly committed in eastern DRC in the early 2000s. French authorities accused him of involvement in summary executions, torture, rape, and sexual slavery during a brutal military campaign known as Effacer le tableau or Erase the board. But in a surprise move, Lumbala fired his lawyers mid-hearing, even as the defense was still challenging the jurisdiction of the French courts.
The Congolese justice system today is well organized and best placed to judge crimes that were committed on Congolese soil, crimes whose victims are Congolese. This trial has been misdirected from the start, and on behalf of our client, we challenge the legitimacy of the French judiciary to conduct these proceedings in the framework of a fair and equitable trial, as required by international law.
Some crimes are considered so serious that they concern all of humanity. When such crimes go unpunished in the countries where they are committed, it becomes the responsibility of other states to fill that gap in justice. Today, France is assuming that responsibility. Congolese victims have been waiting for this day for more than 20 years, and we are confident that the court will finally hear their voices.
Boualem Sansal is now in a hospital in Berlin after Algeria agreed to pardon the Franco-Algerian writer, releasing him after a year-long imprisonment that sparked widespread criticism. The 76-year-old author was convicted of undermining national unity and insulting public institutions and was sentenced to 5 years in prison. Algeria credits Germany for the decision to release Sansal.
Boualem Sansal became a novelist relatively late in life. Now 81, he was in his 50s when his debut work of fiction was published. Before then, he'd been a teacher and a civil servant, living, he said, quietly and out of the spotlight in Algeria. His first book, Le Serment des Barbares, The Barbarian Oath, is a narrative of Algeria during the civil war of the 1990s. In his prize-winning work, Sansal didn't hesitate to take aim at the highest political figures of Algeria, including sitting and former presidents.
In Algeria, my books were censored because they were full frontal attacks on power. I named names. I didn't use any aliases. I named them, Mr. Bouteflika, Mr. Boumediene, and so on. And I treated Islamism the same way. So, of course, I made a lot of enemies.
An atheist and proponent of science, Sansal has regularly written and spoken out against religious extremism. One of his works is set in a dystopian world taken over by Islamism. Sansal has warned of a growing so-called Islamization of France, a position that's endeared him to some French far-right leaders. His pro-Israeli stances have also caused outrage among some in Algeria. Sansal has called himself a reluctant dissident.
Socially, I don't exist in Algeria. I'm not invited anywhere.
Sansal was granted French citizenship in 2024 in a ceremony presided over by President Emmanuel Macron himself. In November of that year, he was detained in the Algiers airport and then sentenced this past March to a 5-year prison term on charges of undermining Algeria's national unity. It followed comments Sansal made questioning the borders dividing Algeria from regional rival Morocco, saying that during the colonial period, France had redrawn Algeria's frontiers to include lands that once belonged to Morocco. The case became an element of a larger diplomatic rift between France and Algeria, with Macron continuing to appeal for mercy for the imprisoned writer. In the end, Algeria accepted a proposal from Germany to pardon Sansal, where he was set to travel for medical treatment. According to his family, Sansal suffers from prostate cancer.
Now in Gabon, a court has sentenced former First Lady Sylvia Bongo and her son Noureddine Bongo to 20 years in prison for embezzling public funds. Both were tried in absentia, accused of stealing state money during the rule of Ali Bongo, the deposed president whose family governed the oil-rich nation for 55 years. Noureddine has denounced the verdict as a quote, predetermined legal force, saying the judiciary now operates under fear and intimidation. Ali Bongo himself, ousted in a 2023 coup, is not facing charges. Now, lawyers for West African nationals deported to Ghana have filed an injunction against their forced deportation to their countries of origin. On Tuesday, immigration service officers forcibly removed over 20 people from a hotel in Accra, sparking outrage after videos showed people being dragged from their rooms. The incident has intensified the controversy over a recent U.S.-Ghana deportation arrangement. Rights groups and lawyers, including Oliver Barker for Mawar, condemned the action as inhuman and possibly unlawful. Our Ghana correspondent Justice Baidu reports.
Leaked videos from yesterday showed immigration officers forcibly pulling out some of these deportees out of hotels where they are being kept since they arrived in the country from the United States between August and September of this year. The current location of these individuals are unknown, as the government has remained tight-lipped about their whereabouts. The lawyers say some of these deportees, who are largely from Sierra Leone, are being taken back to their home countries despite securing U.S. court orders that say that they are at risk of persecution or even killing in these countries.
They were practically dragged out on the floor and taken away. We are disappointed in the treatment of persons that Ghana has received, whether or not validly or legally under an agreement. We have an obligation of humanity to individuals, to persons that we call our fellow West Africans, and we are disappointed in the course of action that have taken place. We are determining and we are looking forward to petitioning both the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, the Attorney General as well, on the treatment of these individuals.
The government of Ghana has turned down concerns for it to make public the agreement that it went into with the American government, despite huge calls from the country's main opposition and right campaign groups.
You know, the executive has shown that they have very little respect for the court processes. Even when we have filed processes in the past, they have snuck out individuals out of the country. And we want to be careful that even as we are taking legal steps to protect these individuals, we don't end up in such a scenario again.
Ghana had to agree to taking in these deportees in return for the reversal of visa restrictions that the Donald Trump administration had slapped on the country at the beginning of the year. Some 40 more of these deportees are expected to be sent to Ghana in the coming weeks, according to reports.
Now, continuing our coverage of the annual UN Climate Change Conference, which is currently taking place in Boualem, in Brazil, European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen called attention to a striking imbalance of the $2 trillion invested in clean energy last year. Only about 2% went to Africa, despite the continent holding 60% of the world's best solar potential. So how can Africa turn words into what's and ensure this transition brings real jobs, energy access and growth? To discuss this, we're joined by Tony Tiyu. He's the founder and CEO of Renewables in Africa. I just welcome Tony. So I just mentioned that Ursula von der Leyen highlighted that Africa gets only 2% of global clean energy investment. So why is this gap so persistent? And also, what's stopping investors from seeing the continent's potential?
Good evening, Clara. It's good to see you again. So the 2% figure is shocking, but it's not surprising. You know, Africa has sun, wind, and also young talent. But what we lack is confidence from capital. Investors, they still see a good number of risks in Africa: currency volatility, policy uncertainty, and also great constraint. But many of those risks are manageable if we have proper structuring and local partnership. And the truth is, perception hasn't really caught up with reality because the returns are strong. The demand is huge and the market fundamentals are improving fast. What we are missing is tailored finance and trust in African capability, I would say.
So what do you think that African governments and entrepreneurs can do differently to build confidence among investors?
So I would say government must focus on clarity and consistency, because investors, they can handle almost any policy, but what they can't handle is unpredictability. So if we have streamlined permitting, transparent tariff, and also credible offtake agreement, this is key. And for entrepreneurs, what they need is to professionalize their project preparation, have clear data, solid business cases, and also local community engagement. And when these African players bring well structure and also de-risk project, the confidence would follow naturally. And it's about proving reliability, not pleading for aid. I want to insist on that.
So where do you see the opportunities for clean energy growth on the continent?
So I would say, broadly speaking, there are 3 areas that stand out for me. Commercial and industrial solar, because businesses, they want energy independence because grid costs rising, right? Decentralized mini grid and also storage. This is to electrify rural area faster and also smarter, and green hydrogen and value chain localization, especially in the North and Southern Africa, which is linking to Europe demands. So these are not future dreams. I want to insist on that. They are bankable opportunity now if we have the right partnership forming.
So in concrete words, what do you think concrete steps are needed to get projects moving across the continent?
I would say we need 3 things again. So blended finance, where we're using concessional or GFI money that will be used to unlock private capital. We also need grid and storage investment, because generation alone won't help if power can't move, also can't be stored. And regional cooperation. The African Continental Free Trade Area can enable cross-border energy trade, but also scale. So if we combine all of this, I believe what we could get is Africa tripling renewable capacity well before 2030.
So COP30 is ending in more than a week now. So looking ahead, do you think that this COP won't just bring more words?
I would say I am optimistic, but I'm cautious, because words alone will not light up homes. So what matters more is translating the COP commitment into actual contract, but also connection. You know, we've had, decade of declaration, but this decade for me must be about delivery, because we know that technology exists. Capital is here, and there is an urgency which is undeniable. But what we need is action, partnership, and accountability. If we bring that together, we're really onto something transformational, I would argue.
Thank you very much, Tony Tiyu, for your input as usual. Tony Tiyu, founder and CEO of Renewables in Africa, concluding today's edition of Eye on Africa. Thank you for joining us. Keep on watching France 24.
On November 13, 2015, I was at the Bataclan, in the mosh pit.
The concert began. We arrived at the moment there were noises like firecrackers.
There were shots, reloading, again.
There were lots of France 24 journalists who were like me at the scene of the attack, somewhat by chance. And I immediately called the newsroom and said, something very serious is happening. I don't know what it is, but some people are dead.
The second explosion at Stade de France. Run, get out of here. We're being attacked.
There I found myself in some kind of no man's land, police blocking every street. Everyone was looking at each other, trying to understand.
It was the image of war arriving in the streets, with all its suffering.
I admit that for the first time in my life, I put my camera down. Actually, there are few words you can say at that moment. You just listen.
10 years on from November 13th, 2015, join France 24 as we remember the events of that tragic day. Watch the ceremony live and hear eyewitness accounts across our social media.